Okay. So Yavni, we're picking up with you at
Yep.
Siman Pei Zayin, Seif Vav.
Great. I am sharing screen. Can everyone see it? Okay, so this Seif is sort of a mix of random borderline cases, mostly disconnected borderline cases. So coming from different sources and with different like curiosities to them. So, and it is what the Mechaber's text is lifted straight from the Mishnah Torah. So I just put that first. And does someone want to read it, or should I? Because it's I can like point along because they formatted it a little confusingly. Should I just ask someone? Lexi, do you want to read it?
Explain to me what the parenthesis. Oh, this is what. How do you read this? What is the
Oh,
text?
so I'll read this and then you'll see how I format it. I just to clarify it for myself, because it's like a list it's two different lists, but if it's just a block of text, it's hard to see that. So it says המעושן והמבושל בחמי טבריה וכיוצא בהן אין לוקין עליו, וכן המבשל בשר במי חלב או בחלב מתה או בחלב זכר או שבשל דם בחלב פטור ואינו לוקה על אכילתו משום בשר בחלב. And then it goes on in the Mishnah Torah, אבל המבשל בשר מתה או חלב וכיוצא בהן בחלב לוקה על בישולו ואינו לוקה על אכילתו משום בשר בחלב, שאין אסור בשר בחלב חל על איסור נבלה או על איסור חלב. שאין כאן לא איסור כולל ולא איסור מוסיף ולא איסור בת אחת. So I'm going to focus on the first part because that's what's actually in the seif. And looking for the sources of the first two, we get to the Yerushalmi. And does someone want to read this?
Wait, do you want to mention something about this the second part here? Ve'eno loke al achilato mishum basar b'chalav.
Yeah.
Are you going to talk about that later?
Yeah, definitely.
Okay.
So I guess just to translate the first part, so is smoking. So like the first part is about the question of what counts as bishul, and it says in smoking or cooking in the hot springs of Tiberia or similar things in that category, you don't get lashes for it if you cook basar b'chalav in those ways.
Okay, wait.
Similarly,
quick question. Sorry, I was a little confused when I read this. When I first read this week, I had my initial impression, but everything I read and saw and heard about it was sort of contradicting it. Is it saying if you smoke in Chamei Tveria and you cook in Chamei Tveria, or is it saying smoking, comma, or cooking in Chamei Tveria?
Oh, I saw it as two different things.
Because my initial thing was I saw it all as one. If you're smoking or cooking in Chamei Tveria.
Yeah, no, I'm pretty sure it's smoking wherever you do your smoking, or alternatively cooking in the hot springs as a way of cooking.
Yeah, and
good question.
After, if you notice, it says v'chayotze bahen and not v'chayotze bo.
Nice, good.
Well, right, because it's two actions in Chamei Tveria or kayotze bahen.
It could be, but
so grammatically that still works. And the reason I thought this is I remember actually from my years at Pardes when we were, I think it was Danny Sinclair who taught us that it's not considered cooking if it's from a natural source. And so the Chamei Tveria for me, what struck me about this whole thing is talking about from a natural heat source. It's not a fire that somebody is putting in or something somebody is doing for cooking. It's a natural heat source that's there. Right. And so therefore it's not considered bishul.
These are two types of cooking.
Because the smoke is
There are two types of cooking that are
Right,
both
two types of cooking.
that are both hisronot that don't qualify them to be the right to cooking.
Okay. All right, said it. I wasn't married to my idea. It was just the impression I had, so I was confused. So.
Great. And it goes on. And similarly, one who, if you cook meat in mei chalav, and I'm not really going to get into what that is because that's the next seif, so I don't want to step on it, or in the chalav of a meta, or in milk that it was taken out of, was milked from an animal that has already been killed or has already died, or bechalav zachar, or in the milk of a male, or or if you cook blood in chalav, then you're patur and you don't get lashes for the issue of basar b'chalav. Although you may, or depending on the case, you might get lashes for something else. That's what we'll get into later on. Great. Any questions there? Cool. So looking for the sources of the issue of what type of cooking it is, the source that comes up comes from the Yerushalmi. Does anyone want to volunteer to read this?
I can do it. Oh, Josh will do it. Josh, go ahead.
Great. Thanks.
So I might as well at the beginning. הנודר מן המבושל, מהו שיהיה מותר מן המעושן? מהו שיהיה מותר במטוגן? מהו שיהיה מותר בתבשיל שנתבשל במי טבריה? So someone makes a neder not to enjoy anything that's mevushal. What does that word actually include? Does it include things which are smoked? Does it include things which are fried? Does it include things which are cooked in hot springs?
Right. So I think until now it's actually stating an opinion that it doesn't include those things, I believe. Someone might correct me if I'm wrong. So this is stating an opinion that's different from what we see so far in the Mishnah Torah, that it's actually mutar. Like it's not the same thing. Smoking is not the same as cooking. But go on.
רבנן דקיסרין שאלון מאושין? מאושין?
Yeah, maybe
מאושן?
that's
שיין?
Yeah.
Much better. It's Yerushalmi, who knows?
Yeah, I think, yeah, anyway. Exactly.
מהו שיהיה בו משום בישולי גויים? So the rabbis of Caesarea asked about Meushan. Is it included in Bishul Akum, in the laws of forbidden things? Non-Jews?
Yeah.
Is there a question or a statement?
I think these are all unanswered questions, Yavi, is the way.
Oh, really? Okay.
I think so. Right? Mahu Shiyem, I mean, I'm not sure, but I'm basing this on the Magi Mishnah, which is going to come next. So
Okay.
No, it's clearly the lashon is the question.
Okay. I stand corrected. Thank you.
So they keep asking all these questions?
Yes, they keep asking.
מהו שיהיה בו משום תבשילי שבת? So is this Meushan, does that include in the laws of forbidden cooking on Shabbat? מהו שיהיה בו משום בשר בחלב? Is it included in the prohibition of cooking meat and milk? מהו שיטבל מעשרות? Does it become tevel for tithing? And the same question, הנודר מהמושן, מהו שיהיה מותר בתבשיל? If someone makes a neder not to enjoy meushan, can they enjoy something which is mevushan?
Great. Thank
Good
you.
questions.
Yes. Thank you. And so how we get from this to the Rambam's conclusion, the Magid Mishnah explains, and Joel, do you want to read that?
Yeah,
you mentioned
it. But it's very interesting that it's here. He's got, and the Shohar has the passive voice, but in the Rambam, I think he actually uses the active. But it's a side note. Right? He says Hashen, doesn't he?
Right.
It's, But all right, Hamushan, Baya Dilo Ishta Birushalmi, right? This is a question that's never resolved in Yerushalmi. Binadarim, Perakano Dermin Hamushal, Ve'adua Shesafek Torah Leachmir, Ve'ain Lokin Alav. And we know that the rule is when you have a safek of a deraita, we're machmir, but we don't get lashes for it, right? You don't punish based on that. So, right. Which is how the Rambam seems to rule there. Ve'amushal b'chamei Tveria, Gam ken nireh sham shehu shaveh lemushan. Ulagabe Shabbat, Shemavashal b'chamei Tveria, Patur kaniskar b'hilchot Shabbat. Right, it seems to be a similar category to the Meushan, and we know about Shabbat that if you cook in Mei Tveria that you're Patur. So, you can kind of draw a parallel between those two cases.
Great, thanks.
Yeah.
I wonder if this, if that famous question is Suffolk Deraita L'chumra, is that a din derabanan or deraita? Do you think this rule that the Maggid Mishnah is saying casts any light on that issue? Because he says Ein
It
lo
makes it seem like it would be a derabanan.
It's a Rabbanan, yeah.
Right. Ein lo kinalav makes it sound like it's not even, if we do right to usher, then you should get whipped.
Unless you say that it's a why there are deraita isurim that you don't get whipped. So you could say the deraita isur that is safek deraita asur. Yeah.
Okay. I mean, generally a lav that has a maaseh in it is usually whipped. But you're right. You're right. It could be an exception. It's not really a proof.
But that's interesting. It could be good evidence for it. Okay, and as a sort of aside, I looked at it a little bit, and there's some research that suggests that cooking in hot springs is the original cooking. So we're saying that it's like not necessarily exactly what cooking is, but in fact it might be the original one. There's a book that suggests sort of speculatively that like people like early humans must have cooked would have cooked first over open fire, and then like in order to develop the idea of cooking in like boiling water and cooking in boiling water in here it says, but in terms of discovery it makes sense, it makes it cooking in water makes sense only if the idea evolved imitatively in some isolated part or parts of the world blessed with hot springs, as in New Zealand's North Island. Hot water being a rare natural phenomenon, both idea and method would subsequently have to be disseminated by migrating tribes, which could explain why there is no indication of the technique being used before 5000 BC. So Mei Tiberia might be the original, and then cooking on a fire is after. And just another more recent research, more detailed, that was trying to link locations of early human settlements to hot springs based on evidence of the bacteria that were alive there. One of the researchers said, if there was a wildebeest that fell into the water and was cooked, why wouldn't you eat it?
Because it's nevela. I'm sorry.
Good answer. Yes.
I feel obligated to say that this isn't just an ancient thing. This is also a modern thing. A couple months ago, some guys were cited and fined in Yellowstone because they put a raw chicken in an oven bag and dangled it in a hot spring.
Don't do that.
And that violates one of the rules against, I don't know, getting too close to the hot spring or putting stuff in it.
Yes.
I thought of cruelty to animals.
It was a dead chicken, I think.
Yeah, the chicken was dead. Unfortunately, the park ranger didn't keep the chicken, so then they ate it and told everyone it tasted delicious.
They never, when you do things wrong, never tell anybody about it.
Thank you for bringing that up. Okay, so that's it for the first two. Any questions about that? We'll move on to these four, where they come from. Great. Would someone read, let's skip the Tosefta because it's quoted, what we need from it is quoted in the Bavli. Yeah, does someone want to pick it up here? Source 6.
Yeah, I can read. All right.
Thank you.
המבשל במי חלב פטור, ודם שבישלו בחלב פטור, gam. Is that supposed to be gam?
Oh yeah.
Gam
No, I think
hatamot
it's just supposed to be
hagidim.
somewhat. Yeah.
Okay, hatamot v'hagidim v'karnaim v'hatapim shebishlan b'chalav patur hapigil v'hadnotar v'hatameh shebishlan b'chalav chayav. So one who cooks in milk water, so whey, is exempt. Blood that's cooked in milk also exempt. Bones, sinews, horns, hooves that are cooked in milk exempt. But for pigul, notar, and tameh, kosher meat, most likely, that are cooked in chalav, there you're chayav.
Great.
Keep reading, or is that?
Sure. Yeah. Please.
Hi Tana Savar Isur Chala Isur. So this Tana holds that one prohibition can fall on entity that already had an existing prohibition. So that's in the latter category of Pigul, Notar, and Tameh. Hamavashel b'mei chalav patur misaya l'reish lakish titnan mei chalav harehen kechalav v'amochel harehu keshemen. So the one who cooks in whey is exempt. This supports Reish Lakish for his taught. The whey is like milk. I don't know what mochal or mochel is.
I'm not sure either. Sorry.
Okay, that's like oil. Amar Reish Lakish lo shanu el hakshir et azraim aval linyan bishul basar b'chalav mechalav eno kechalav. Reish Lakish said this was only taught with regard to making seeds presumably fit for tuma, but with regard to bishul, basar b'chalav, a whey is considered not like chalav, which is he's supported because it's only patur, not chayav.
Right. Thank you. Questions about this? There's one other source from the Gemara close by that's going to give, again, the dam, and then the other two that we have gotten from the Rambam. Does anyone want to read it?
Sure.
There you go.
אמר שמואל, גדי לרבות את החלב, גדי לרבות את המיתה, גדי לרבות את השליל. So Shmuel says, so it says lo tevashal gedi v'chalav imo 3 times, and so he's saying one of those instances is to include chalev, one of those instances is to include I'm not sure if he means a dead animal or the cooking in the milk of a dead animal.
I think this is a dead animal.
Okay, and one is to include the fetus.
Yeah.
Okay, gedi lehotzi et hadam, gedi lehotzi et hashalya, gedi lehotzi et hatemea. So one instance of gedi excludes blood, one excludes the placenta, and one excludes tamei animal. B'chalav imo, v'lo b'chalav zachar, b'chalav imo, v'lo b'chalav shechuta. So the phrase b'chalavimo means not in the milk of a male animal, and it means not in the milk of a slaughtered animal. This is a little strange because I'm not sure if they mean like slaughtered by goyim or.
I think the way we play it out is that it actually doesn't matter how it died. The point is that the milk came out of the cow after it died. That's what's relevant. The way it plays it out.
Okay, gotcha. And then the last sentence means not in the milk of an impure animal.
Great. Thanks. So from these two sources, this Baraita and this Memra of Shmuel, we get the Those are the sources for the Rambams for other categories of things that are things for which you are patul. And to clarify, wait, where do we? Yeah. And what I had, hang on. Oh, and let's skip to here actually. Do you actually want to keep reading? Do you want to read the Magid Mishnah to explain why this is still included as an isul, even though in the it's not obvious from that memra that all of them would be?
Sure. וכן המבשל כשר במי חלב.
בשר במי חלב וכולי.
sorry. מבשל בשר במי חלב וכולי. בפרק כל הבשר, ברייתא המבשל במי חלב פטור, דם שבישלו בחלב פטור. ואמרו שם, אמר שמואל וכולי, גדידה הוציא את הדם וכולי, בחלב אמו ולא בחלב זכר, בחלב אמו ולא בחלב שחוטה. ובכל אלו נראה שסבור רבינו שהוא פטור, אבל אסור וכן עיקר, ויתבאר דין חלב שחוטה מדין הכחל.
So I don't know if any,
Sorry, go ahead.
I don't know if anyone else has found like a more compelling like explanation for why we believe this is true, or if it's just the Rambam paskin that way, and so we can tell that that's how he reasoned and that's how we and that's how we hold, that's how we believe. But yeah, that seems to be what the Magid Mishnah is claiming anyway. Okay, just to go back and clarify through Rashi what some of these categories mean. Chalav Zachar. Someone like to read Rashi on this? Asher, maybe.
ולא בחלב זכר, שהיה לו חלב מועט מן הדדים, כגון אם נשחטה והיו לו דדים.
נשתנה. Yeah.
נשתנה.
Raise the font. Okay, yeah.
והיו לו דדים. Okay. Remind me, what are dadim? I know it and I'm blanking.
Dadim are teats in this case.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it has just so the reason not for chalav zakar is it doesn't really count because it has the zakar animals have so little so little that come from the teats, and
I think because he's not a mother.
Or is it right? Well,
right. I think
he's
this
not
is
capable of being a mother.
Right. This is just explaining. Yeah, I don't know if I put that in the sheet, but there's somewhere else where it says that that this is because it's not. It doesn't count as a mother. Maybe that's clear.
Right.
And this is just explaining like what is this phenomenon of chalav zachar? What is this entity? So it's saying shayalo to the zachar that the zachar had that the male had a little bit of milk from the teats, or as though it like changed its form in some way, and it had teats like a female.
It identified as a female cow.
No, it's not about it. It's about biology of an animal.
Right.
And I also looked into this, and the best evidence I could find for this was in a forum online about raising goats, in which like one person said, "Oh, hey, I just found out that male goats can sometimes lactate," and then people piled on and said like, "Oh yes, I have had this, and it caused all these problems." And yes, like, "Oh, my male goats are always giving milk." And anyway, and then in case anonymous internet posters are not convincing to you, there was also a news article about this happening in the UAE. And one more, and on the question of what chalav shchuta is, as is relevant to our psak. Did you read this?
תהי משמע ראויה להיות אם, ולא, I can't read this very small.
yeah.
I'm getting old.
Oh, sorry, is that better?
That's better. ולא מי שנשחטה. So when it says that its mother, meaning any animal that's capable of being its mother, if it hadn't been slaughtered.
Right. That's capable of being a mother, and because it's already been slaughtered, it can't be a mother, and that's why we would say that chalav shchuta doesn't count as chalav, and so as chalav of imo in some way. And then and then on the same topic, the Shach says on when the on this question, if you want to keep going.
בחלב מתה, כלומר, חלב שיצא ממנו לאחר מיתתה,
לא שני.
ולא שני מתה מעצמה או נשחטה כדלקמן סימן צדי.
Yeah. About the udder. So this was about that question. We're interpreting this as saying it doesn't really need to be dafka. Shchuta, rather than just that it came out, the milk came out of the cow after it was dead, however it died. Okay, we already did this. Magid Mishnah. Questions about this. So now we're gonna go to the next layer, taking it to the Shulchan Aruch. Any questions so far? Okay, so we've actually already seen the Shulchan Aruch because he just quotes directly the Rambam, הממושל והמבושל בחמי טבריה, אין לוקחין עליו, וכן המבשל בשר במי חלב, או בחלב מתה, או בחלב זכר, או שבישל דם בחלב, פטור ואין לוקחין על אכילתו, משום בשר בחלב. The Shach points out, how much longer should I go?
Not much.
Not much. Okay, so then I'm going to skip this point and
I mean,
yeah.
I don't know. The truth is, I don't know exactly. The truth is we can use a little bit of next time's share also, but whatever.
I can also say Zayin et Chet, I'm not going to be going over very long. They're both very short.
Okay, so
you can take a few more minutes.
So you can take a few more minutes. Yeah.
Okay. I think I'll still skip this if it's only a few minutes because I wanted to get to more what the Rama has to add to this. Would someone like to read this long Rama for us? Maybe Lexi?
Sure. So Haga, וחלב זכר לא מקרה חלב כלל. אם נפל לתוך גדרה של בשר, אינו אוסר.
Wait, do you want to translate that and then I'm going
to, So any milk that would somehow come from a male animal, it just isn't considered, doesn't have the status of chalav. And so if it fell into a pot of meat, it would be totally fine. It wouldn't mess with the pot of meat.
Okay, so I'm going to pause you here and go to other sources. So where the Rama is getting this, it seems odd to me, first of all, because the milk from a male animal should actually be very similar, I think, to the milk of another animal, and it's not clear why this would stand out among the other things that are listed here as being more lenient for the Rama. So where the Rama gets this is from Isur Ve'eter Aruch, which I only found in this format, and this is basically the same thing in the kind of Aval shel zachar is talking about here mei chalav and such, and he says aval shel zachar אם נפל לקדרה אפילו בוודאי, אין צריך לבטלו כלל דאין עליו תורת חלב כלל, אפילו מדרבנן במילתא דלא שכיחה לא גזרו ולא גרע מחלב אישה אחר שפירש.
Very important explanation.
Yeah, so he says, but from a male, if it falls into the kedera, even if you're sure about it, you don't need quantity to battle it at all, because it doesn't have it's not considered milk at all, even the Rabbanan, and they didn't make a gzera on it. And you certainly wouldn't, what he says, and this is key, is that it shouldn't be any more stringent than what we said about a chalav isha.
Yeah, but wait,
So
talk about, I think you read over too quickly what I think is a very important part,
go ahead.
which is the bemilta de lo shchicha lo gazru. That's a general rule that you should remember. In other words, the rabbis, we don't necessarily know exactly what was included in the rabbinic isur, in the rabbinic gezerot. They said other kinds of milk they also included, but we don't know if they included things. So we have this rule that helps us clarify that things that are uncommon, I mean, however many articles you found, I think still those articles indicate how uncommon it is. That's why they wrote those articles. No, so things that are uncommon, we can presume, we have the right to presume that the rabbis didn't include in their gezerah, and therefore it's not being treated like milk.
Right.
And that's a general rule in general about gezerahs. They don't apply to unusual cases.
Yeah, thank you. That's very useful.
And right, and so too, I mean, milk of a woman is also pretty unusual. I mean, nowadays actually they sell it for women who need it, who can't lactate and things. I read an article about that, but it's actually hard to get. But also women's milk usually goes directly into the baby's, they didn't have pumps in those days, it goes directly into the baby's consumption, not going to have it really to fall into your pot.
Right.
But go on, I didn't read what he said about chalav aim though.
So that is a really helpful side point. I was taking it in a different direction, which is what I didn't write who this is. This is what the Shach says on this, on the Ramah. Lexi, do you want to read this, or does someone else? Yeah, do you want to read this?
Sure. Sorry, where is the?
It's this
Here,
one,
14.
sorry.
Okay.
14, yeah.
Right. So v'chlev zachar lo mikre chalav v'chule mashman dekevan de lo mikre chalav v'lit be'afilu isor derbanan ina oser ma'achal be'eser v'heter sham katav de lo gera mechalav isha v'diver harav hamagid nir'ed chalav zachar asur midirabanan. So we have an opinion that it actually, he's saying from the Ramah's words, it implies that there's no Isser there at all, even Durabanan, but we have an opinion that it is actually Isser Durabanan.
Which, just to be clear, was what we saw earlier, the Magi Mishnah on the Rambam, that he was saying that all of these in this category are considered like that.
Yeah. וכן משמע קצת בש"ס, דאמר שמע בחלב אמו, ולא בחלב זכר, בחלב אמו, ולא בשחוטה, אם כן, כמפיק לו בחלב שחוטה, קיימלן מדרבנן מהאסור, קיימלן בחלב זכר. So in one of these other cases, with this same derivation that we just saw with Shmuel, we hold that it is not Asur Doraita, it is Asur Derbanan. And so you could argue that all of the cases in that derivation there are Asur Derbanan, just not Doraita.
In other words, I guess on another principle, that anything that the Torah specifically permits, the rabbis forbid.
I don't know. I think it's not so nonsensical for them to be okay, it's not what it's the same thing as, them saying that Dafka is talking about Bishul, but we still say that a lot of these other forms of things are like Teli, Asur Durabanan, In
other words, what I would say it a little bit differently. Maybe I don't know if it's in the words of what we're reading right now, but maybe it's that if the Torah is already discussing it, then and the rabbis are already removing it from the list of the Doraita, then it's obviously in their minds. And therefore, when they made their gezeras, they didn't not think of it. It's not something that's so unusual.
It's close enough. Right. They're saying this is close enough that we have to specify the Torah as part of this thing. But it's also related enough that we have to include it here.
Mhm.
Well,
You want me to continue?
there's a question whether the rabbis want to apply the categories of Deraita to Drabanan. They know it's Drabanan. So they're not inventing everything. The question is application. You're taking a system that works Deraita, except these things are exempt from Deraita. But we take the categories of Deraita and we apply. But then you still want to make a distinction. And so where do you show the distinction? Part of the distinction is not being so obsessive. By not being so obsessive, you hint and you show and you say that it's very important on one hand, because we apply Deraita kind of categories. But on the other hand, we don't apply all the categories. Anyway.
Yeah. Thanks.
Okay.
Yeah, please.
And then v'nireh harav hamagid ma'ireh b'chalev zachar shel behema k'pirish Rashi v'lo b'chalev zachar shaya lo chalev mu'at min hadadim k'gon im nishtane v'hayu lo dadim v'chen pirish maharshal sham v'chen muchach ma'ashas sham lehedya deka'amar batar hachi ba'eminem v'shal b'chalev gedi shelo hinika ma'hu Amar lehem it itzrich l'shmuel l'meimar b'chalav imo lo b'chalav zachar zachar hu delo ati l'chlal em aval hai kevan de ati l'chlal em astor shmamina b'chalav zachar shel behema iring. So as in he's clarifying that he means from like from a like male animal versus from like a male human who is
Right.
able to produce it, right? Because we do have
who means
cases
that?
we do have cases in the Gemara of like of men being able to produce milk to take care of their children.
Right.
So
just to be clear, who he the Shach is clarifying that who means
he's clarifying that
Zachar
this is what
Shebema?
Shmuel the Chalav Zachar is like Shmuel meant like Dafka Zachar Shel Behema is the thing here, not the like milk that a human Zachar could produce.
Right, he's learning from the context that specifically the ruling that we're getting from the Rav, the
As in
Maggid
he's saying
Mishnah
that like
and
right, the
Rambam
Maggid
and the-
Mishnah would
right.
think, and he's like, you might have thought that this applies even to like milk made by like a male human. And he's saying no, the Maggid Mishnah would agree that's not like Asur D'Rabbanan. He's talking specifically about this like
Right.
male behema milk.
Right, but I think the implication is that, and it might, yeah, is that, and here, if you want to read the last little bit, is that,
Yeah, or I guess
go
the
ahead.
other way around. So v'chalav zachar da'adam shita delogera mechalav isha lefi zeh mechaber she'etik lashon Rambam t'mash v'mine t'gam mechalav zachar pator aval asor v'arab bagot lo pliki. So the other way around, sorry, is like, oh well, obviously, like chalav zachar of a human male would like clearly be the same status as that of like a human female and be pator aval asor, and so he just mentioned like chalav bahema because that I guess would be less pshita to you.
No, well, it's the chalav behema that's patur aval asur, and the chalav.
No, he says both.
No,
They're
he's
both
saying
patur aval asor.
no. I think he's saying that right. Is that the for the chalav of a zachar behima, everybody agrees. The Rambam, the Maggid Mishnah down, including the Ramah,
Including
that
the
is
Ramah, right.
That's patur aval asur. And when
Right.
the Haggai's talk it comes in and says chalav zachar is doesn't even need bitul. He's talking about chalav zachar of a adam, right? And there's like no he's like erased the machloket essentially here.
Right, that's how he's settling the.
So Lexi, you're looking like
okay.
I'm crazy, so maybe I am, but
I don't quite understand.
I think
And this shach to me just looks like it's saying that both the chalav zachar behema and of a human are patur aval asor.
No, no. What we've said in the previous seif is that the chalav of chalav isha isn't the category of patur aval asur. It's not even asur derabanan. Patur aval asur, remember, is potentially still even asur deraita. It's not even asur derabanan. It's only we have an issue of marit ayin. That's what we saw in the previous.
I
seif.
don't understand the last line. V'harav v'haga lo pligi.
Right. והרב בהגה לא פליגה על זה, is not the Rama, Harav Baga, the Rama is not disagreeing that a chalav zachar shel behema is still patur val asur. Rather, when he's saying that it's not more than it's not considered chalav at all, he's referring to the chalav of an adam, a zachar de adam, chalav zachar de adam, which makes sense because in the context.
But if it's so pshita, why did he bother mentioning it?
Right. I think it's a great question. I think it's very odd that the Rama brings it because it's like the Rama didn't realize that they were talking about Zachar Behema in that context, or he thought they were talking
we
about.
have a very beautiful way
odd,
of,
but it makes it.
Right.
Wait, but it makes sense because where he's learning it is he's learning it from this statement that it's like certainly not going to be more than a woman in the
I thought
which
when
does
it
make
says
it
Harav lo pligi, sorry, just a second. When it says the Rama lo pligi, think about this. Maybe another possibility is that he's saying the Rab doesn't distinguish between a human and animal. Male milk. Is that possible?
I
was trying to think about that.
I'm
I
also
had Yavni's read on it.
Yeah, but Yavni,
Okay.
did you look at the Pri Megadim?
No.
I haven't finished it, but he says Vayen Shach the Rama Maire Chalav Zachar Dam Ha de Behema Asur Mi Derabanan. Right, that's the conclusion we've just come to.
Beautiful. Right. It's a beautiful way to miyashev the stira. He's got stira that says that Chalav Zachar is Asur Derabanan. When it's of a, so when the Rama says Chalav Zachar is mutar, he means of a human one, which of course is just like of a woman, and that's also mutar. So then of course this would be mutar.
Yeah, but
so that's a beautiful teretz. But then you have to say that the Yisrael Heter was also talking about human being.
Yeah, that's what the Pri Megadim jumps.
Is that possible?
I think it's even more. It seems likely in the Isur V'Heter. Even it seems unlikely. Why? Because why would we even be talking about male human milk? That's not. But it seems likely because the comparison point that it has is, it's talking about it and it brings it up as a comparison to woman's milk, and why would you be bringing in woman's milk when you're talking about the milk that came out of
Yeah, I think it's a forced teretz.
It's a little hard to see why he's bringing it, why he would be bringing in the issue of male human milk, but in the Isur V'Heter where it doesn't have the same context, it seems likely that he is to me.
Oh, you think the Isur V'Heter is likely talking about human being male milk?
Yeah.
The Pri Megadim says no.
Okay, great.
Yeah, it's his response. He says there's no way that the Pri Megadim is talking about that, right?
You mean the Rama? No,
the Isur V'Heter is talking about
right. In other words, he rejects this shot.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. It seems I was trying to think maybe the shot isn't saying because it's so crazy, but it is a clever teretz, right? It works. It's a technical teretz that fits, but it's unlikely because who was ever talking about that? In other words, he's inventing a new category. I mean, he's not inventing a new category. He's discussing all of a sudden a new category that we didn't really talk about so much.
And it also has the ramification of making the Rama much more strict than he actually is.
Then we presume he is.
We presume he is. Fair enough.
Right. Yeah. More questions or opinions on this?
I'd like to go back and look at the Rama for a second.
Great, because that's what we're going to next anyway.
See, if he would have written Aval Chalav Zachar Lo Mikri Chalav Klal, then I would hear it a little bit better. In other words, But another category that we didn't talk about.
The reason this is
Right.
But when he says v'chalav zachar lo mikri, sounds a little bit more like he's arguing.
the problem is the Shulchan Aruch does in Chalav Zakar.
Yeah, I know. He says,
Right.
oh, v'chalav zachar patur aval asur, presumably.
Right. So
He's saying about that, chalav zachar lo mikri chalav klal. He's saying
right.
also that patur means the normal patur. It means patur and mutar. And I mean,
I don't know. I'm not sure
Yeah,
the Shach is
but
saying
the word
that
mikre is very definitional. It's not just a thought, in terms of authority or which way we should pass it. It's like a definition. It's a little mikre. It's not chalav.
No, the question is, what chalav is what chalav zachar is he referring to? And I'm trying to say that if he would be talking about human male milk, then he would need to tell us indicate to us that it's a new thing. He's adding in a new topic.
can I ask
But you don't
a
think he would have
question
had-
on your read of the Isur Veheter? Why does it make sense to say lo gera michalav isha on female goat milk, on male goat milk?
Because those are both categories of things that the pasuk is not referring to.
But I would say male goat milk is closer to female goat milk than
It is, but it's
human mother's milk is too. Like it seems like an odd kal v'chomer.
Well, I think he's just saying that it's it's in the same category of things that are not shchiach, and therefore the Chazal didn't make a gzeron, like that kind of stuff is going to drop into your meat pot essentially.
Okay.
Like Rav Nachum said, it probably they weren't. We didn't.
Right.
I don't know if this is true, but I'd imagine they didn't have the same kind of storage systems we have for human breast milk that back then. So.
Right. Right.
So wouldn't it be if the focus of the pasuk is on the fact of it being a mother, then but it's already excluding certain mothers, then it's definitely going to exclude non-mothers,
Mhm.
given that
Okay.
that's what the emphasis is anyway.
All right. I'm willing to see it. Give me one second. Did you have? Yeah.
because he was also talking in the previous section about whey. We're talking about all kinds of different things, or whatever mei chalav is, but we're talking about all different things that are not in the category of milk. So that's why he's allowed to mix between human and animal.
Okay. Any other points about this, or should we go on to the rest of the
Yeah. Let's finish the
list of
Ramah.
chomot? Lexi, you've read a lot, but do you want to keep going, or do you want me to find some more?
Yeah. Okay. So aval chalav meta umechalav osrim hamachal כמו חלב עצמה ואפילו בבישול יש לאסור לכאכילה. So like these are definitely like asur ba'achila, like chalav atzma, and like we can say that like actually l'chachila, even for bishul you shouldn't be using these.
No,
Yesh
they're all-
omrim-
Wait, I didn't like the way. Wait, right? A whey going to, or whatever mei chalav is, it forbids a meat meal. That's what he's saying.
Right. That's what I'm saying. Is that like he says it is chalav like enough that it forbids like meat in the way that any chalav would, and you can't eat it. And it might be even chalav enough that you can't, like you shouldn't, I can't choose to cook with it like I can with certain other things. And then יש אומרים תאסור לחטות האש תחת קדירה של עובי כוכבים, לפי שהם מבשלים בהם פעמים חלב, פעמים בשר, והמחטא תחת קדירה שלהם בא לידי בישול בשר בחלב. Some say I can't even stoke the coals of my goy friend's fire because they might be cooking basar and chalav, or they might be cooking like some chalav in a basari pot, and I'm going to end up helping cook basar v'chalav, chas v'shalom. And then עוד כתבו, דאין לערב מים שידיחו בהם כלי בשר, עם מים שידיחו בהם כלי חלב, וייתן לפני בהמה, תאסורים בהנה. I can't even like mix water that's been in contact with my basari pots and water that's been in contact with my chalavi pots and then put them together in my cow trough, because then my cow will be drinking from basar v'chalav water, and it's asar b'hana. עוד כתבו, זה הכלי שעושים במים לחפיפת הראש, אין לשמש בו דעושים אותה מאפר שעל הקירה, רעילותו להתערב שם בשר וחלב. Some say you can't even use the hair washing stuff because it'll end up actually having basar and chalav water.
Wait, translate that carefully.
I think it's toothpaste. Toothpaste, not hair washing.
Yeah, but like I can't.
The kli.
As in right, like the kli. Sorry, the
Not
kli
talking
that
about the
I
water.
use for the no, because there was a different source. I don't know if it was.
Yeah, it's very confusing.
But there's a different one where it also talks about not using something for chafifat rosh. But here, the stuff that I use for whatever my hygiene, I can't use that kli for also cooking because we're in the process of my
You're
hair
making
ritual.
Well, let me explain
I end up having basar v'chalavi flavors.
Let me tell you what I think is going on here. You're making shampoo. You're manufacturing shampoo, and in the process of manufacturing shampoo, you're mixing together different substances.
I think it's that I have efer from the stove. That'll be efer from both like basar and chalavi pots.
That's how you manufacture the shampoo. You use efer. You use ingredients, which is burnt up milk and meat, and you're going to boil it up in that pot to make your shampoo, and now the pot is aser to use, which is a bit of a chumrah because a big chumrah because it's inedible, presumably this efer.
Yeah.
It's inedible, but if you would say there's an Easter hana, then
exactly, yeah, exactly. In other words, it's not because it's food; it's because that's all these examples are just things that are like getting some kind of hana for milk and meat. He's telling you how strict milk and meat is, that you can't help your friend cook his milk and meat pot because because that's a cooking. That's not a hana. That's cooking. Any kind of cooking, even if you don't want to eat it. And here, any benefit from it. You can't have benefit maybe from it. Okay. Stricter than like treif.
But you don't think, hold on, I want to clarify because I read that as the problem is they cooked the shampoo in this kli. And then if you use it, it's got the flavor of the shampoo of this efer that was from basar b'chalav in the kli, and now you're heating the kli, which is cooking again basar b'chalav together, right? Is it?
Well, he doesn't say who made it. I don't mean. Yeah. He's basically saying have separate pot for making shampoo.
Okay.
And you're right. I don't know why you would be taking a goy's pot.
Yeah.
And then making your dinner in it.
I don't even think that to be your dinner. It could be to make your shampoo in it, right? It's just that the goy wasn't so careful when they used it to not use, efer that was from basar b'chalav.
And don't go down. Don't rent when you rent the shampoo factory for the week to make the kosher shampoo.
Yeah,
you got to kasher the pots.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I feel like if it was explicitly a goy's thing, it would have mentioned that, especially given what just came before this. I think it's that you are making I buy a kli with the knowledge that this is gonna have my hair product in it, and I won't be able to cook food here.
Yeah, either way, I don't think it's a nafkamina. Both would be required. If you do it yourself, or either way, you can't use that same pot for cooking legitimate food.
The nafkamina is whether it's for cooking food or can you make can you make shampoo in the tray shampoo pot?
My assumption is that and also here is that I might be totally wrong, is that it's basar and chalavi enough that we don't think you should cook in it now, because we don't think that's a good thing. But it's not basar and chalavi enough that it's actually oser bahana, this shampoo that you've made. Ultimately, I'm taking efer from having cooked basar and efer from having cooked chalav. That's not actually basar and chalav. So it's far enough from that. I can make my shampoo out of that. but like I still shouldn't eat something that had that mixture because it's too close to being basar and chalav.
Yeah, I think you're right.
Which
In other
also I
words-
think actually works really well with this siman, right? Like with what we said with chalav meta or mechalav, right? Where we say that like it wouldn't necessarily be aser bahana if you mix them, although maybe lichatchila you shouldn't, although like this would be a different step than that, but you can't eat it.
Excellent. Yeah, I think you're right. I think that the eating is worse, and therefore probably you're allowed to use the shampoo. Yavni, or continue. Right? ולכן.
ולכן יש לאסור גם כן להשתמש מן הקדרות של התנורים שבבית החורף, משום דניתזים עליהם לפעמים בשר וחלב מן הקדרות שמבשלים בתנורים. I guess, I don't know what the Beit HaChoref is. Is it like the stuff I use like my hot house for the winter? Like I don't.
I think it's a oven. I think it's like a communal oven. It's some kind of communal cooking place. I think that not exactly sure. It might be. I think you get a like everyone would bring their pots to the big stove, to cook there because it would be a lot of money to heat up a. I don't know why exactly. I had a little bit of problem with my explanation because why it's horrific. What it has to do with winter, but the pot, the place, the communal stove. So you can't use.
I always understood it as, it was as a heating. The purpose was for heating up. That was the major, heating the room. So
right, that's my other possible. Right, it may not, but then it's
and that secondarily, you can toss, a hot dog on it or something.
But the problem, yeah, that's what I also like that. But then why isn't it in your house? I mean, what it's not. So what is the pots that are there? They're your pots. What do you mean? I
don't know, they have warm rooms, places you can go, and if you're working out in the field, sometimes they would have warm rooms or like a little shack, or if you went ice fishing, right?
Maybe what he means is like you have a pot of water in your oven, and you can't use that pot for milk or meat because it may have got a drop of milk from one other pot or a drop of meat from another pot. Maybe that's what he's talking about. I mean, what are these pots that you can't use? Of Goyim? Who would ever think you could use the Goyish pots? What pots are we talking about? It's a bit strange.
Because again, you're using a pot that's not really its major purpose. Major's purpose is to get warm air going.
Right.
Unless these are.
But then you throw in a hot dog, you throw in a bareka, I don't know, something.
Unless these are pots unless these are pots that are just used to heat, like anything that will just kind of burn up and to keep the room hot. And then sometimes people throw their food in there, or around that area, and food, little sparks or little, droplets come flying around.
I was imagining potentially that you have like an oven for heat purposes, and you also heat like objects in it in order to bring the heat to other parts of the room. And so that's sitting in the oven. In the meantime, you cook on top of the oven because that's your hot place. So you're cooking on top of the oven, and because you're sometimes cooking meat and sometimes cooking milk on top of the oven, then that could splash into those things in the oven. And so then those things in the oven, which you're using to bring heat, don't then go and use that as a kli to cook other things on, because it has had the mixture of milk and meat from the splashes.
Didn't people used to take things like pans off that to put it under their beds to heat them in the
right
stuff?
Right, exactly, that sort of thing, like to put it in the bed or to bring it to another part of the room. Yeah, that's what I was imagining anyway. Yeah.
And then the last line, and we got to take a break.
I'll
just add one thing, that based on the Pri Megadim where he says V'tanarim shalanu b'veit hachoref ein regilim lit bashal sham klal, the implication is that, like, just sort of what we were saying, the main purpose of those Beit HaChoref ovens was not cooking, but they did occasionally, as opposed to our Beit HaChorev ovens, or warmers is a better word. We don't do that at all. So that supports the read that it was a sometimes cooking mechanism.
Mm-hmm. And the pots there were just like you put a pot of water to extend the heat, kind of. I don't know.
Yeah.
Listen,
Reminds me, I went to
in Jerusalem, there is a hammam in many places. What is it? It's heat and water.
I want to say I went to a shul in Samarkand in Uzbekistan, and they have a summer shul and a winter shul in the same building. And the winter one is there's like an oven in the middle of a smaller shul, and they have a kettle on top of the oven which is heating up the place, and they drink tea during the service. So that's kind of what I'm imagining for the Beit HaChorev, even though it's a shul and it's not a home thing. And I remember we had this we were talking about Hilchot Shabbat. They were talking about the Beit HaChorev and Akol Cholim Etzel Akol. Like there's all sorts of leniencies in Beit HaChorev when people are just freezing. And the
Then again,
going out.
it's the communal oven. Then, in other words, they're bringing it says lefamim, they're bringing pots that are dropping droplets on the other pots. So in that shul, they would go. Everyone would, since there's an oven burning there for the shul for Saturday morning, that shouldn't be freezing. Everyone brought their cholent there, put it on the thing, and it's saying don't use like the leftover pots because who knows what somebody else maybe spilled on it.
Yeah, there's a Gemara too that talks about them building a winter shul and a summer shul, and
Beit Chorev, Jastrow says winter house. It's not surprisingly.
Thanks. All right, should we push through this last line?
Yeah.
Which is a helpful last line.
Okay. בדיעבד אין נחוש בחוזה, ואף לכתחילה אין בזה אלא חומרה בעלמא, והמקל לא הפסיד. If you actually want to decide to use your shampoo pot to make some food in, it's really fine.
Your husband or wife may not want to eat that food for other reasons. Okay, let's take a break. Yavni, you have any closing remarks you want to say before our break?
No, thank you. It was sort of like I didn't feel like there was a strong central narrative. It was sort of a grab bag, but some interesting points along the way.
Mm-hmm. When is milk not milk? Okay, so we'll take
and bishul, not bishul,
and bishul, not bishul, right? All right, let's take a break. We'll come back at 1:15. So.
Okay. Hold on. Rather than doing a source sheet, I've just gotten very spoiled on doing PowerPoints. So we'll start with Siv Zayin. Siman Zayin. המבשל שליל בחלב חייב, וכן האוכלו. אבל מבשל שליה או עור וגידים ועצמות, ויקרא קרניים וטלפים הרכים פטור, וכן אוכלם פטור. So on the surface it seems very straightforward. The feet is considered meat l'chol davar, so you're chayav, and all the other things, the placenta, the skin, the tendons, the bones, the ikare karanayim, which are like the buds of the horns, and the soft flesh at the hooves are not considered meat, so it's patur. Why isn't this working? Okay. The first question that sort of popped out is, why is the first part about the shlil even here? I mean, that seems kind of obvious. I can't imagine anybody would question that that's not meat, the chol davar. So I came up with two possibilities, but unfortunately, my second possibility only sort of came to my attention very, very late in this whole process of the learning and preparing. So I didn't really have time to go as in depth to it as I'd like. But the first possibility is that it's a contrast to the remainder of the halacha. The things after the shlil, those aren't necessarily so. They aren't so obvious. And so, whereas you might think all of those things could be basar, it could be that what the halacha is really getting at is to say, no, those aren't basar, but just so you don't get confused, once you see that all of these aren't basar, don't think that the shlil is. The other possibility, which I found intriguing, and I really want to try to research this a bit more, but like I said, it was only very, very late in this whole process of preparing, was that the shlil isn't the embryo, or the fetus, sorry, but it's the uterus, which apparently there are some indications that it's referring to a uterus of a cow that was recently shechted, or the cow that was shechted, and somebody might want to eat the uterus as an organ to eat, but recently, not long before the animal was shechted, there was a baby calf within that. And so then the question comes in, is this organ then something that can be cooked with milk or no? I'm sorry?
Didn't we discuss this last week about shilya and shlil?
Well, the difference that I understood is the shlil, in general, the shlil is understood to be the fetus, and the shilya is the placenta. And it's sort of,
right,
in my mind, it sort of struck me as similar to what we discussed last week with the eggs, as far as the yolk and the white. Whereas the chelbon is sort of what protects it and is the sac that goes around it, and the chelmon is what's deep inside. And that's sort of how I understood the sort of relationship also between the shilya and the shlil. Almost every place I've seen refers to the shlil as the fetus.
Yeah.
And that's pretty much as far as I understand.
Go with that.
Right, but I'm intrigued by this other possibility, because that would also give a whole different understanding to where this halacha is going.
Where'd you get that from? Where'd you get this idea?
It was one of the I found various shiurim to listen to, and there was one that mentioned that, and that, like I said, it was only very in the last day or so, and I didn't have a chance to listen to the whole shiur and find out how he got it and where he got it from. So I want to. I'll take it on myself this coming week, to explore that a little more deeply and see if I can see if there's anything that's convincing in it, or if it's just a nice try. All the things that the Torah and the Shulchan Aruch both say one is patur. Both the Shach and the Beri Tev say that, okay, yeah, they're patur, but there's actually an Isur D'Rabanan. Shach says patur v'chein ha'ochlan v'chulei, ha'chinami Isur ha'ma'ika, and Beri Tev also very similar, aval Isur ha'ika m'vashel v'ochel. So, while the Torah and Shulchan Aruch just say patur, the Shach and the Beri Tev are saying, well, yeah, patur d'oraita, but we still won't do it. On the other hand, the Pitrei Tshuva, which is Avram Eisenstadt, cite a very interesting tshuva that focuses only on one of the listed pturim. There are all these pturim, and the fact that he focuses on one is sort of, to me, says that we're not saying that all of these are asur d'Rabanan. They actually are patur. And so now there was a tshuva that had to actually go into the detail of one. And what was the tshuva? The tshuva he talked about was the question of bones. And the question of bones was especially interesting because bone marrow contains flavor. And if bone marrow contains flavor, then we're not just in the basic, is this considered basar? Is it not considered basar? But it's also into the realm of noten tam. And in the interest of time, because I know there's still several more simanim within the sif, I'll just give the bottom line of it. He cites a tshuva of the Minchat Yehuda, which says that there was a case of a of a hollow bone that fell into a dairy pot. And so the Minchat Yudal ruled that the contents of the pot become asur, because there was a possibility that the bone had contained marrow, and the marrow dissolved into the dairy contents after the bone fell into the pot. So he said, Safek Yisur D'Oraita L'Chumra. The Beit Lechem Yuda, was like 100 years later, 150 years later, disagreed, said in his tshuva that we don't assume that there was marrow in the bone if we don't see the marrow. We don't. If you find an empty bone in the pot, we can assume it's an empty bone, and we're not going to answer it. And the Pri Megadim argues that why was this even a question? Because he says hard bones have an Isur D'Rabbanan in any event. So the Pri Megadim is basically agreeing with what the Shach and the Be'eri Tev said. It's an Isur D'Rabbanan, so why are we even discussing this? There was an interesting side question I found regarding the skin, and I don't really have an answer to it. But if we're saying that the skin, the leather, that the ore is also an Isur, does that affect things of leather that we might wear? Was a question that I actually found in a couple of the shiurim I was listening to. And the example he gave was if I'm wearing a leather belt while I'm cooking, some hot meaty oil splatters onto it, and the next day I'm cooking a big pot of mac and cheese. This isn't the example he gave. This is my own direction on it. And if it tips over, the cheese gets on my belt. Is my belt now containing the tom of both the meat and the milk together?
But Asher, he's talking about if just the cheese falls on your leather belt, right? Or whoever's bringing this up, right? It's not the belt as a cleat. It's the belt itself might be a problem. Is that what they're saying?
Well, because see, that's the question. Is the belt itself also considered? You're right. You're right. The real question, you're right. The question should have been just on the mac and cheese. And you're right. Is the belt itself considered something that's basar? And then if I touch cheese on it, then there's a problem. Or is it not an issue? I just thought it was kind of an interesting side question. I didn't really have an answer for it. But I'm gonna like I said, I'm gonna go with the original. I think what the halakha is really coming to show us is, like I said, the whole thing with the shlil seems pretty muvan me'elav, whereas the others are not. And so I think the halakha is trying to tell us that just because these other things that we might think are basar are not really considered basar, don't also think the shlil is. And so that's my take on Sif Zayin. Sif Chet. This goes into what Yavni purposely didn't go into on the Mechalav. It's actually very interesting. Yesh mishomer denasiu b'dechalava perush chalav mitmatzev b'kipaon hagvina enam bichlal mechalav v'asur me'et Torah. Ela mechalav haynu achar she'osim hagvinot mevashlim hanisivei והאוכל צף מלמעלה, ולא נשאר בו אלא מים בערמה, זהו נקרא מחלב. There is one who says that the nasyube dechalva, which is actually the description he gives, is the description of whey. This is when you're separating the components of cheese and you get the curds, which are the clumps of it, and the whey, which is the liquid. There is one who says that that's not what mechalav. Although from many of the other sources, that's what many people say are, and we'll get to that in a second. But there's one who says that it's not, and therefore it's asur min Torah. Right? And this is relevant because earlier we had
that's still chalav.
In Yavni's that what they thought is mechalav, which is whey, is not really chalav, so the Yisur is still right. And he's saying, no, it's D'Rabbanan. He said, no, that's not what mechalav is. This is something, this whey that we're describing is chalav lechol davar, and you're completely chayav on it. what he's saying is mechalav is once you've gone through that process of separating the curds and the whey, you go through another process where you boil the whey. When you boil the whey, the proteins, I think it's like the lactose, sort of floats to the top. You skim that off, and the only thing that's left is pure water. And according to this one source, that's what mechalav is. Now, the one who says is the Rosh. And we know this because the Tur quotes it also. He says, "V'katav Avi Admon Rosh Zal Nesuvi Dechala Ba'ila Bichlal Mechala Ba'asur Mentorah B'chulei." And the rest of the Shulchan Aruch is just a quote, is just citing exactly what the Tur quotes his father as saying. So up until now, our understanding of mechalav was the whey that we were discussing earlier. The halacha, like I said, describes whey, the nasuv b'dechalaba, as the liquid that's extracted from the process of curdling cheese. The Torah and the Mechaber are citing the Rosh. They're saying no, that's not what the mechalav is, and it's a surah right. It's the right and not the rabbanan. Rather, whey is absolutely completely chalavi. So according to the Rosh, what mechalav is, I guess I already pretty much explained this. It's the extra boiling that's done to the whey afterwards. The lactose or sugars, whatever it is, float to the top. The liquid remains. That's mechalav. Halachically, this is not going to actually be a huge nafkamina. It's really a question of D'oraita versus D'Rabbanan, right? Either way, the mechalav, or I'll get to this a second. The phrase mechalav still don't eat it or cook it with me. It's just a question: are you how chayav are you? Hold on, I think I skipped something. Okay, what the Torah and the Shulchan Aruch cite the Rosh regarding the description of mechalav, it's what other poskim call mechalav, which is the water of milk. We have it in the Shulchan Aruch in Pei Aleph Hey, where it says me raglei behema v'chaya torim v'chalav ומחלב שלהן מותר, והוא הדין למימי חלב שלהן. And both the Taz and the Shach there say that מימי חלב, as they say, ויש מי שעושה בזה פירוש במימי חלב דהיינו, לאחר שבישלו הנשיאים להוציא ממנו האוכל הצף למעלה דחלב, דווקא התיר כתוב, and the Shach also says, והוא הדין למימי חלב, דהיינו, so what they're calling mechalav, which is a whole different category than the mechalav, is what the Rosh says and the Torah and Shulchan Aruch say that's actually the mechalav. Okay, and Rashi apparently also in Chulin also agrees with the Taz and the Shach that the Meimei Chalav is something different, and the Mei Chalav is the whey, and therefore he also the Rashi and Taz and Shach are all saying that Mei Chalav is the Rabbanan, not the Oraita. That's really what I had. Right, that's how Rakadas. I see Isaac saying. I also saw a thing on that it's similar to how feta cheese, the whole thing is something connected also with feta cheese. So
I wonder if there would be an afkamina if we wouldn't hold like that opinion that says the only thing that's mechalav is the second level. Then that would mean that the second level might be a mutter. In other words, if we held that there was only that mechalav was really that first stage, then the third stage might, well, I guess it wouldn't really be mutter. It would still be a product of milk in any case.
Right.
So the nafkamina is, what about your whey powder, for your protein shake with whey powder? So do you have to wait? Can you eat that you have to wait 6 hours after your meat before you can have that whey powder, presumably.
Yeah, actually.
Nachum, have you checked with Moshe on this?
Well, Moshe talks about like whether the din of chalav akum applies to powdered milk.
No, that, I
I
understand.
don't
it, but
know
I'm
if
talking
that he,
about- I'm
I
talking
haven't
about
checked.
way.
I have not checked.
Because I think he paskins that it's not milchik.
All right, I'd like to see that.
And
There
the
was also-
OU paskins against Rav Moshe, if I remember.
There-
Who?
The Orthodox Union
Oh.
paskins against Rav Moshe. You should check it out.
All right, we got to go on to the next speaker.
No, but also I want to add one thing, in creating all these derivatives, it doesn't mean that it's pure. In other words, you scoop out the protein, as Ashley explained well to us. But depends who's scooping it out. You scoop it all out, not necessarily.
Well, it's a derivative. In any case, it comes from milk. Milk is all those things that are in the milk are even if you divide them up. If I take an apple and divide it into four, take the seeds out, all those things are still part of the apple. If the apple is forbidden, the seeds are also the whole. I mean, actually, I take that back because we do see things with meats that maybe the
Right.
bones are not forbidden, and we do see that
Blood.
sometimes parts of the things are not forbidden. But we never saw that by milk. Well, that's the question. That's the question. But then the mei chalav is a part of the milk that's only as a d'Rabbanan, really. It's not us, or it's not called milk, really. It's from the milk. Yeah, interesting. You have any want to say something?
Oh no, I was bringing up the example that there are parts of the animal that we say is not
We
part
don't,
of
right. I asked the kasha on myself. All right, next speaker. Who is the next
I believe
speaker?
that's me. This will, I guess, be a little rushed, but we'll make it.
Well, you know what?
work.
Who's after you is you're till Isaac, right? You're Isaac. You're after Lexi.
Yeah, I have to eat 11.
And you're the end. So you know what? We'll keep you for next week if that's okay.
Last and least.
All right. Last and most important, you're the cleanup batter. I'll keep you for next week because next week is a bit short anyway. So that gives Alexi a little bit more time.
Okay. So this one is
Ooh.
that we did.
But your internet is not good. At least for me, it's not good. Lexi?
Switching thing. Can you hear me right now or no?
That's better. A little bit better. But your image is no good. Right, Yavni? It's not just me.
Yeah, it's
Okay.
not just you.
Ah, she's back.
Now, yes, I briefly, but is it better now?
Now it's better, yes.
Great. Okay. So we talked actually briefly a couple months ago when we were talking about cheese. We touched on this issue of like the idea of the contents or the keva as being pirsha ba'alma versus actual chalav. So that is part of the larger question people deal with, like issues of kashrut around cheese itself. Here, we're obviously talking about the issue specifically within the question of basar chalav. So I'm gonna share my screen.
I recall, Lexi, you gave us a talk on cheese making.
Yeah. Yes, that is what I am referring to. Do you guys see my screen?
We do.
Okay, great. So I'm going to quickly read the
But if you could make it bigger,
Okay. Can you make it bigger a bit?
Yes, one sec. Can I do that? Is that better? Do you want to do a little more?
even
probably
more would be even better.
More.
How's that?
Should do.
I think, yeah. There you go.
Okay.
That's good.
Okay, great. Okay, so I'm going to read this Mishnah in Avodah Zarah, just because it's a little confusing out of context, but it's sort of a basis for some of this stuff. I'm going to do a little bit of summarizing because we don't have a lot of time, and it gives more of the basis for this machloket. So, Amar Rabbi Yehuda, Sha'al Rabbi Yishmael et Rabbi Yehoshua, Kshayu Mahalchim B'derech. Amar lo, Mifnei ma asur gvinot hagoyim. Amar lo, Mifnei shma midinota b'keva shel nevela. Amar lo, v'lo kevat ola chamura mekeva nevela. V'amru kohen shedato yafa sorfa chaya. V'lo hodu lo. Amru ein hanin v'lo moalin. Okay, so up to this point, we have this conversation between Rabbi Yishmael and Rabbi Yehoshua. We say, why are goyish cheese why is it not kosher? And the initial answer is, oh, well, because they like use the rennet of a nevela. And again, it's important to distinguish between when it says just keva, it means the rennet. When it says or keva, it's like the skin lining, but just keva is just the rennet that's like inside of the keva. So initially he says that's the problem. But then who is who again? Rabbi Yishmael asked Rabbi Yehoshua. So Rabbi Yishmael is like, that can't be the problem.
I hate to interrupt you. But hard to resist. Keva, couldn't keva here mean the sour milk in the stomach? Because in the next section he's drinking it.
Yeah, that's what I mean. It's like the stuff in the stomach. I'm saying rennet because it's like we're talking about this in the context of the cheese.
But it's not rennet. I mean, rennet.
It is the rennet.
Rennet is confusing because rennet is an enzyme that can be extracted from various places. It could be extracted.
It is the
milk.
Stuff in the stomach that is like soured and that it can be used to then like that it can be mixed with other milk to curdle it. Right. And so then he says that can't be the case because we have this. We know that. First of all, the rules of an olah are more machmir than that of a nevela. And yet we say, if you're a Kohen and you're not so picky about what you consume, you can just like rip open the keva of an olah and slurp up the contents in there. Clearly, if that's fine, then like whatever is in the like keva of a nevela itself, like shouldn't be an issue. So this is like, and it's like, it's not considered me'ila. It's not an issue in that case, even though this is within the context of an olah's stomach. And so Chazar Amar lo mifnei shema midinota b'kivat egle Avodah Zarah. Amar lo im kain lama lo asura bahana. And then we have hisu l'davar acher. We're not going to go into that. Basically, he's like, I changed my mind. That's a fair point. Actually, it's because we're talking about specifically egle Avodah Zarah. And Rabbi Yishmael pushes back on that too and says if that were the case, actually there should be a certain hana case too, which we don't have. Then he like whatever distracts him. It's not the main part of our thing, but basically in a couple of our sugyot, especially in one in Chulin, they talk about lifnei chazara ve'achar chazara because there's a seeming contradictions that we get in some of these sources. And so a lot of people, especially those who are more mekil around issues regarding the keva, will put a lot of things with regard to like lifnei chazara is before this change of heart that we see with Rabbi Yehoshua in this Mishnah, right? It's like before he got the like pushback that actually, no, like the contents of the keva are not a problem. When we see things that imply the keva is fine, it's like achar chazara, right? After Rabbi Yishmael was like, what about the olah case? And he conceded that was a fair point, right? So we'll see some of that. Not going to read the entirety of this Rashi, but as we'll see when just like reading the Torah and Shulchan Aruch, we have basically three main points along a spectrum here when it comes to what the status of the contents of the keva are, or what we refer to as the keva. Is it like chalav mamash? You treat it the same way. That's Rashi. Is it pir sheba'alma? Okay, it's just like excrement from a cow essentially, and so it has no food status. Or is it that the more congealed stuff is like excrement, but the clearer stuff is still like milk, and that's where Tom's kind of in the middle. So Rashi here has an uncharacteristically wrong Rashi. I'm sure people who know more about Rashi have thoughts on what it means when there's a Rashi that's this long. about it maybe not being Rashi or being from his students or da 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 da. In any case, very long Rashi and it's been chulin. And this is him going into how he like understands the keva and what's happening here. So I'm trying to think of the best way. I think we can start here. He's trying to explain why he thinks that the Ola case isn't proof that keva in general is pirsha. The reason the Ola case is permitted is not because the cave, like what's inside of it is pirsha. So Joel, do you want to read from the Kevat Ola de Sharia?
Sure. All right. The Kevat Ola de Sharia mishum de lav gufahi ela yenakto mi'imo v'havile knus b'mei ke natun bekara umutar ketanya trefa shenaka minek shira kevata muteret mimesha kanus b'mei. So this is right the case of the kevav and Allah that we said was permissible, right? It's not actually its goof, right? That it's nursed from its mother. It didn't produce it itself, right? And it's just collected inside of it, and it's just like putting it in a vessel, right? And we have this proof that we have from a non-kosher animal that nurses from a kosher animal, or a treifa that nurses from a non-treifa, right? That's perfectly fine. All right. V'namiti raya b'masechet avodah zara mina the isrei hana'a share perushehu. All right. So, this is the case, from the proof from avodah zara that something that is an isrei even though it's asur b'hana'a, something that comes from it, that excretes from it, is actually mutar. Okay. Vegabe egle avodat kochavim dasur perisheo midikatani kevat egle avodat kochavim asira. But for these avodah zara cows of some sort, or calves, I can never remember what the calves are, the names for young cows, right? They're the things that derive from it are asur, right? It teaches, right, that the stomach, not the stomach, sorry, the stuff in the stomach, let's call it, what do you call it, the rennet, right? Is that called the rennet for the moment, right? Of these avodah zara cows is actually asur, all right? And so
call it rennet. Don't call it rennet.
Not rennet, you're right. I
call it sour milk.
I'll go sour milk, whatever the term we're using is here.
I prefer you to call it
think
sour
it's most useful to refer to it as rennet just because that's how we interact with it.
No, I think it's very confusing to call it rennet, because if there's a difference between this and rennet derived from the stomach lining. This is not.
Yes, that's why it's kevav versus or kevav.
Or versus or.
That's why it's rennet versus stomach lining.
Both are rennet. But both are rennet.
Oh, okay. So it's the type of rennet. Yeah. That's fair.
I don't want to use the word rennet because rennet doesn't distinguish how you got the rennet.
You want to say liquid rennet, and
no, it's not rennet. It's sour milk.
I don't really think we have time for this debate. So in any case, so Rashi's basic thing, and what we see here with this kanus me'eha, is that Rashi basically thinks that whatever is in the keva goes after the status of its mother, but that it is in fact food. And he brings in the fact that when something is pirsha, unless it's avodah zara stuff, it's permitted. However, he doesn't think the keva is pirsha. So in the case of the olah, it's fine because whatever is in that keva actually has the status of the olah's mother, who is not an olah in this case. And so it's not me'ila for the kohen to drink that. However, in these cases, like he thinks that when it comes to issues of like basar v'chalav and stuff like that, it absolutely does have chalav status. According to Rashi, it's not pirsha in any way. And earlier in this, which becomes slightly relevant, he disagrees with people who argue not from the pirsha angle, but from a basar, like a notain tam bar notain tam angle. Some people say that it's not an issue to like ma'amid, to like, to make cheese with this keva, because like it's kind of, there's this distancing from the actual basar, aka the keva lining. And Rashi's like, you can't compare that. He says he has a fun little language here. He really doesn't like that comparison. because he's saying like the case of the dog is one in which like each of these steps, it's like mutar, right? And he's like, that's different than getting something that like from the ikr is gonna become basar v'chalav. Like he's saying like not bar not only works when it's multiple steps of like mutar flavor transfer. And that's not what will be happening here. So he A, thinks that the keva is food, is chalav, and B, thinks that provided that's the case, you can't argue that it's permitted to use this from a not bar not framework. Okay, and so now we have, and also a crucial thing to know, I mean, not that crucial when it comes to our actual deen, but when it comes to understanding how they arrive at different points, is that like the Rif and Rashi have different girsaot on one matter, which is this case of, they say, Ksheresh Yanka Mina Trefa. Rashi has that being a sword, and the Rif has that being mutar. So that definitely does influence their perushim. So Yavni, do you want to read this Rif?
Sure. From where?
Here.
גמרא, עטו כבת עובד כוכבים, לאו נבלה היא. אמר שמואל, חדה קטני כבת שחיטת עובד כוכבים, נבלה. ומי אמר שמואל הכי, והאמר שמואל, מפני מה אסרו גבינות העובדי כוכבים, מפני שמעמידין אותן באור כבת נבלה, הכבה גופה שהרי לא כאשר, כאן קודם חזרה וכאן לאחר חזרה. I'm not sure I'm going to be able to translate that.
So that last bit is what I was referring to with the Avodah Zarah Mishnah, which is that the difference between or keva versus keva, right? That like one of these statements implies Shmuel thinks the keva itself is aser, whereas the other implies he thinks only the or keva is the problem, which would imply that the keva itself would be fine. And so it says this is an akashia. The statement where that implies that he thinks the keva itself is fine and only the or is an issue is achar chazara. It's after Rabbi Yeshua changed his mind and was like, fair point, the keva itself isn't an issue.
Nice. דתנן בעבודה זרה, שאל רבי ישמעאל את רבי יהושע מפני מה עשו גבינות העובדי כוכבים. Amar, do you want me to read this? This is this is going to be a repetition of what we just read?
No, because this is, he's just going to quote it briefly and then it'll be the riff.
Okay. מפני מה עשו גבינות עובדי כוכבים, אמר לו, מפני שמעמידין אותן בקיבת נבלה, והלא קיבת עולה, חמורה מקיבת נבלה, ואמרו, כהן שדעתו יפה, סופה חיה. חזר רבי יהושע ואמר לי, מפני שמעמידין אותה באור קיבת עגלי עבודת כוכבים, והלכתה, אין מעמידין באור קיבת נבלה, אבל בקיבת נבלה ובקיבת שחיטת עובד כוכבים, ובקיבת כשרה שינקה מן הטרפה, מעמידין. וכל שכן בקיבת טרפה שינקה מן הכשרה, מאי טעמה דחלב המכונס באור קיבה פירשה בעלמא היא. So even if we don't do it in the stomach lining of a nevela, but we can do, even we don't, sorry, not the stomach lining, even we don't use the stomach milk from a nevela, we can use the stomach milk to make cheese from I was right.
Use even the stomach milk from anyone.
We can use the stomach milk from anyone. We can't use the stomach lining from a nevela, but we can use the stomach milk from a nevela or shchuta or from from anyone.
Lexi, is that girsa different from the Gemara that we had? Because I see in the second case when he's choser, he changes to or keva. Was it or? Can you go up and show us the or? Was it or keva?
I believe it was. Oh no, the kevat eglei avodah zara.
Right, that's a key difference, because that's the difference.
Well, no, that's not. I don't think that difference is as crucial as the one about him having the Sheresh Yan Kamina Trefa, because we don't even end up holding by that position of Rabbi Yehoshua either, because that one's also Doche.
No, but the Rif is holding by it.
No, the Rif is like clearly, he's saying also, like, he's the when it comes to the Ave Kochavim thing, but I don't think that that's the crucial, like, defining
No, but-
factor, because we also see, and I didn't bring this because we don't have time for it, but there is also a whole thing in Chulin where it gets into Shmuel, and which is quoted above here, which Gavin just read a bit of Shmuel saying the issue is the or kevat nevela. So it's not like, and that's one that we do have the girsa of. So it's not like only the Rif has a girsa that mentions the or kevat nevela being an issue. We see that elsewhere. So I don't think that's like the main, I don't think that's the ikr of where he gets this,
Well,
where he gets this drash.
let me just interject one thing, one reading, where I understand the Rif. Why does it say or keva of the egel of Avodah Zarah? Because the keva of an egel of Avodah Zarah is not usher, because it's from its mother, and its mother wasn't having anything to do with Avodah Zarah. Its mother was a very nice mother, and the milk that came from her is fine. So
No,
he
so
has to say it's
I
the
think the
or
only-
keva, and he's being consistent, and therefore that's how he gets the
He
halacha.
is.
There's,
What I'm saying
that's
is,
how he gets the halacha that the liquid in the stomach is always going to be mutter.
I only
Unless it
think
came
that
from a
the
trade
only
site.
difference he gets from that part of the girsa is some people think Pirsha, like he thinks Pirsha, even if Avodah Zarah is permitted, whereas other people say that Pirsha is permitted except for of like Avodah Zarah, because they're use this language of like, oh, they're happy because of how fat the cow looks because of all the poop inside of it, and so like you benefit from it, and
Right.
so.
This
No,
is
and
where it
so
doesn't talk about
that's
Pirsha.
the no, but that's the only distinction. Like this, I don't think this is crucial to the Rif's Perush in general. The only distinction would be Dafka
okay.
vis-a-vis like Avodat Kochavim. So fine, like the Rif thinks that the Pirsha of Avodat Kochavim is permitted, other people don't. But
Not
like
the Pirsha, just
in
the milk.
general,
Not all the Pirsha.
no, the Pirsha. He thinks it is Pirsha.
I think milk is different from Pirsha.
No, he thinks it isn't. Because
why do you say
Pirsha
that?
Almahu. That's the whole point of the Rif. He thinks all of the sour milk is just Pirsha. That's like the crucial element of
Yeah,
the Rif,
okay.
and then the Rambam's Perush is that they think everything in the Keva, everything in it is pure Pirsha. They say you can do, as long as you don't use the skin, you can do whatever you want with what's
With it.
inside of that Keva,
Right.
because it's just like, you know, knufa, whatever. It's not food. So that's the Rif's like
Excellent.
like drash here, and the Rambam, you don't have to read it, but the Rambam like, you know, copies him unsurprisingly. And so I also don't know if we will get through both of the halacha before 11, but we can look at the Torah Shulchan Aruch for Tet. So somebody want to read?
Don't skip anything that's important. You can do it next time also.
Yeah. Noam, do you want to read the Torah and the Shulchan Aruch here, since they're both pretty brief?
Sure. Chalav hanimsa b'keva ledat Rav Alfas eno chalav umutar levashel bo basar afilu b'tzilul sheba. V'ken katuv harambam v'Rashi asro. V'katav shu chalav gamor afilu hakaru sheba kol sheken atzilul. So milk that is found in the keva, according to the Rif, it's not milk, and it's permitted, and you can cook meat with it, even if it's liquidy. And so writes the Rambam, but Rashi forbids it, and he writes that it's full milk, and even if it's congealed, it's forbidden, and all the more so with liquid. Then the Shulchan Aruch writes, Chalav hanimsa bekeva eno chalav umutar levashel bo basar afilu bitzalul sheba. So he basically brings the opinion of the Rif and the Rambam. V'yesh mishos ser, and then the Ramah is v'cheno agin. So he then brings Rashi and then says,
Sorry, I don't
bring-
know what that was.
well, he might. It's unclear whether he brings Rashi, he's bringing Rabbeinu Tam, but
Yeah. Like specifically, and we'll see in the next Siman that the Ramah seems to hold like Rabbeinu Tam, so
Right.
thinking that there's some of this
liquid is
permitted.
out, Karush is in, right?
Yes, exactly. But the Ramah is just pointing out, he's like, the Shulchan Aruch says we hold like the Rif and the Ramah, which the Rif and the Rambam, which is what he also at the end of like the Beit Yosef, he says Ulinyan halacha kivan sharif Rambam maskimim ladat echat hachinat sinan ben karush ben talul pirsha ba'almahu v'chein nagu. So the Shulchan Aruch says the Rif and the Rambam have this thing. We don't have like a compelling, super strong authority otherwise, but like we don't think the Tosfot outweighs this, so we say it's Pirsha Ba'alma. Whereas the Rama gives obviously more weight to the Tosfot in this case and to Rashi, and so he ends up with Rabbeinu Tam's kind of like intermediate opinion. Trying to see if there's anything else on this Siman that I wanted folks to look at. I think we can end there on this. This Saif and pick up with the next one next class, if that's okay. And I just there's just like a brief note in the Beit Yosef when he's quoting some stuff around like the idea of Pirsha Ba'alma and how that's used. And he's like explaining that when they use that, he means like Hainu lomar de nafak le mitorat ochel, right? He's like just like clarifying which they use Pirsha Ba'alma all the time. But he explicates and says, like, what they mean is, like, it just literally isn't food. Like, none of your concerns about basar v'chalav apply here because it's not only not chalav, like, it's just not food. Like, you can't see it that way. And so that's why, like, the Rif and the Rambam are so unconcerned about what you're doing with this keva. Yeah. So that's the first half. And we can get into Rabbeinu Tam and some stuff about keeping our keva in our or keva next week.
You mean our cheese in our?
As in being like meat, or even just keeping the stuff, like not even necessarily the time to turn it into cheese. Like we will see next week that there's this interesting like almost contradiction. Like the Shulchan Aruch kind of backpedals a little bit. Like I was saying now somewhat flippantly, he's like, oh well, because like the Rif and the Rambam say this, like we go that way, like. But he also actually ends up being like, there's enough things that make me feel a little bit like maybe basar v'chalav is kind of relevant here, that he ends up like holding a stance when it comes to keeping the sour milk in the keva that isn't like that lichatchila position is not in line with the idea of thinking it's really pirsha ba'alma. He ends up, because of that position, saying bidi eved, these things will be fine. But lichatchila, he holds a position that's more machmir than what the Rif or the Rambam would imply. But we'll see that next week.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much. Very interesting. I think it has. I mean, I don't know how relevant it is for making cheese because
it's not how most people make cheese now.
Yeah, I don't think anybody's going to be using the milk of a cow nowadays. The milk of the stomach of a shechted animal. But it's interesting historically, certainly.
No, but it gives us, I'm not sure where the paradigm goes, but it gives us a great paradigm how even though it looks like it's meat, or it looks like, it looks like it shouldn't be, it's we're more interested in its chemical effect.
What does it mean that it's not food when we are consuming it, right? Or it is going into a food product?
So you're not consuming it. It's helping make your cheese. Like I'm not going to be eating the keva itself. Or if I am, to like to the extent that I'm eating the keva, it'll be like the most minute bit. Like unless I am that Kohen, am not going to be like eating this by itself. But
the point is, it's pirsha ba'alma. It's no longer in the category of food that the Torah would prohibit it. It's refuse, and refuse is not forbidden.
Yeah.
Even in food production, like even if we use it as we might use something we would call food, we don't.
Yeah, I mean, we have other cases where we also talk about things not having like tart ochel. Like I mean, sometimes it's used. We have like, for example, I know with gelatin, some people use like the davar chadash argument, right? That like this gelatin is not really like an animal anymore. Like it's a different thing. So it's not the same thing as pirsha. It's a different category. But I think it's a similar notion of a thing that's being used in a food, but that in and of itself we really don't consider to be food-like enough to still have the initial rules of
Right.
that
We have
animal be applicable.
we have ke'etz ba'alma when we say about bones that are left out to dry for a year or something. We call them ke'etz ba'alma, and therefore they're mutter actually, even though they could be from even they're no longer even fleshik, they're parv.
I mean, you could use the pig bones that you dried out to like stir your soup, essentially, right? It's
Yeah, right. Bones, you could theoretically use, like, one of the ideas of matering gelatin is saying that they use bones that have been dried and no longer are called food anymore. Of course, the problem with that theory is that it's not true. They don't dry them that long, and they use also the skins. They don't just use the bones. You'd have to investigate exactly how gelatin is manufactured. But yeah, if it would be, I think somebody said, well, you take the bones from Indian cows that they left out, on the fields because they're holy or something. So they turn into just, rocks. So that you could use. My example is if Charlie Chaplin wants to boil his shoe, and if are familiar with that movie, that soup would be kosher. All right. Thank you, guys.
It wouldn't be soup.
Thanks to everybody who contributed, which is everybody, and in one way or another. And we'll meet again next week. I'll send out sources. It's a short Siman, and I won't send out too many sources, but I'll send out some primary sources.
Chodesh Tov.
Chodesh Tov. Omer
Chodesh
Tov.
Tov, Laila Tov.
Chodesh Tov, and a good Yom Atzomas.
That's why the Haredi were saying Hallel. Now I understand.
I understand.
Okay, Laila Tov.